Hi, everyone. My name is Julia. I'm a senior program associate at CRA, and I'm going to be giving a quick introduction to the UART PhD program before we get started. So UART to PhD has three main program elements for undergraduate students. We have an undergraduate research training course, computing research engagement and awareness workshops, as well as graduate school application workshops for computing programs. All three of these elements aim to help students get a better understanding of what computing research is and hopefully give you the confidence and the skills that you need to be successful as computing researchers so that you can go on to pursue a PhD in computing. Here we have the activities, the description for each activities, as well as the eligibility. You can find all of this information on our website. With that, I will pass things on to Christina, who will be leading today's session.
All right. Thank you, Julia. Thanks for the intro. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And very big thanks to the panelists who are part of today's workshop. We are excited to come back this spring with the first workshop in the series. So just a reminder for everyone of where we are. So this is the first in the computing research engagement and awareness series. We've had, so far a very awesome run of a whole year. So we started these workshops last spring exactly, so a year from this time. And all the workshops are recorded just so that everyone would know, just like we're recording today's workshop, like all the previous sessions and workshops that we've had are all recorded and available on the UART to PhD website. All right, so moving into today's topic. So today we're going to be talking about, the theme this month is research and social good. And with that, we have some really amazing panelists who are, it's amazing to have them here today. Oh, sorry, this is just to introduce myself. I realized that I should introduce myself first. So I just wanted to say hi, my name is Christine Bassam. I am a faculty and assistant professor at Wellesley College. I am the designer facilitator for this workshop series, which means, I just do a few things here and there. Julia does a lot of the work. Really just, I'm here to kind of coordinate and help and, get, kind of organize and help facilitate these workshops. All right, so today's session, as you said, as you expected, so we are going to hear from three amazing active researchers about the work that they do and how it contributes to social good. We encourage you, please, everyone here who's participating, to reflect on your own, and even those who are, listening to watching these videos later on, for your research. We encourage you, please, that as you're listening to this, as you're watching this, to reflect on your own research experiences and interests, and to consider the social and ethical implications of the research you're involved in. Please, CS now tech is in almost everything. We have a very high impact in everything that tech is is involved in, and it's really important to continuously and nonstop think about the implications of the tech that we are developing and working with. All right. So before we move in and, I'm going to leave the floor to our amazing panelists, I just want to quickly just, kind of put a quick definition of what social good is. Just going to give you the general description. Social good is often defined as something that benefits a large number of people. So it can be used to describe so many things, including acts, policies, regulation, practices, tech, so many things. And in the kind of in the field of research, it's often associated with environmental justice and sustainability, collaborative work, fairness and accountability of technological solutions. So it is a term that applies to almost everything that we can think of. And really, it's all about the benefit. So it's all about thinking about what is the benefit of the work that you do to groups of people and communities. All right. With this, I'm going to leave them. Just wanted to quickly introduce our amazing panelists. So today we have a very, very nice group, an amazing group of diverse research with different social implications and social good. We have Areeg Mostafa from University of Minnesota. We have Rukhshan Haroon from Tufts University. So both of them are PhD candidates. Also, we have an undergraduate researchers. We like to do as much as we can to kind of get a diverse set of students to different fields and different stages in their research. We also have Sumin Heo from Wellesley College, who's an undergraduate researcher, just to kind of give you kind of a general range of different research. All right, before we jump into our discussion, so remember this is a panel, so we highly encourage questions. We highly encourage comments. We want this to be a discussion, but before we switch to discussion, we're gonna let each of our panelists first do like a show and tell to tell you a little bit about their research and what is the social good in their research and how they define it in their field. Sounds good? All right. So, I highly encourage everyone before we start. Sorry, Areeg. Before we start, I just wanted to say that if you have questions, please enter them in the chat or enter them in the Q&A. Both Julia and I are going to be monitoring both sides, the chat and the Q&A. So if you have any questions, please free to type them there. All right. Now we're going to get started with Areeg. And this is where I'm going to let go of the control.
Hello, everyone. I'm Areeg Mostafa I'm a PhD candidate from the University of Minnesota, and I'm here to introduce you a little bit about roadmaps research and its social good. In our lab, we have a lot of main projects, but one of the main projects that we've been working on is called Mapedia. Yeah, Mapedia, it's an open source map metadata platform. Its main thing is it's a full open source map metadata portal that is parallel to OpenStreetMap and covers all sorts of map metadata. And the main social good thing that we want from this project is we want to democratize map metadata access worldwide. This way, all the developing countries will have access to valuable map metadata that is hard to get because it's usually given by private industries like Google Maps, for example. And this kind of metadata is actually very, very important for the sustainable development goals. And I'm going to give you an example of 4 metadata types that are important, such as the traffic, energy consumption, road restrictions, or road surface type. These 4 metadata types can work under routing for efficiency that would help us reduce the carbon emissions when we remove the congestion from areas. Also, we are reducing the carbon footprint of cars who have to, instead of taking a 15-minute car ride, it will be like at 1 hour. Also, we can reduce the emergency response time, also increase humanitarian aid access, as well as reaching areas that are undeveloped by having a good road planning, or areas that are even unreachable because there was not a good road plan for it, but we didn't even know that the roads right there have, like, for example, are muddy instead of pavement because the metadata of the roads were not there yet. Now, this is the goals of the project. So this is the main thing of our main project, right? And the project is in progress. It takes some components because it's a big one. But I really want to get into also the goals of us as a researcher as well. So I want to talk briefly about a life of a PhD student before I get into my work. So typically the goals is you want a higher job status, you want to work for nonprofit organizations for environments and stuff like that, but with a salary. You want to become a professor. Personally, for me, I want to do both. I want to become a professor and work for nonprofit organizations to help in developing projects in my home country. And I want to also remove one misconception. Even though we say PhD students, I actually see it as an employee. We're not really students, we're more of employees. And we work on ideas to solve problems similar to how you would do the same in an industry. And while you're exploring problems, you'll get other sub-problems, and then it becomes a loop. Same thing would be in the industry, but instead of doing it in later versions, for us, we would solve them in later publications. But one major thing I really like about the PhD is that I get to learn from the origin. So if I'm working on a problem and I'm using a solution from another person, usually I can get to that origin and ask them questions about their solutions and how did they get there, and also gain experience not just in my problem that I'm solving, but also in my research as well. Now, I want to show you how I got into that loop in my own project for Mapedia. So I've been using course datasets to solve ETA problems. Now, course datasets are very underutilized. I think there was, to my knowledge, only one paper that used it, but they used it in a way that they wanted to disaggregate that dataset. For me, I want to use it as is. And what we mean by course datasets or course OD matrix is that usually when you have trips, you would have a source and a destination as points. But for a course data sets, the source and the destination are zones, they're not points. So you would have a source zone, destination zones, and the trip duration between these two zones. I've been trying to illustrate ideas for this problem for, I think, since I started in 2022. I really wanted to get a traffic-aware ETA from the course datasets. But then when I was doing the preliminary testing to figure out if, I think the control is a little bit, yeah. If I wanted to do preliminary testing so that I can solve the problem and make sure I'm heading towards the right direction and I'm not going straightway, I found that I have really bad results. I got results way worse than the baseline I have put for myself. And then I found out that the problem was with the ground truth trips I've been using. The ones that I've been using to test the OD matrix. Because when I was segmenting the trips, I found that the segmentation does allow round trips like this one, where the start and end are very close, but the trip is very large. And the dataset did not have any information about the engine, for example. So I only had the GPS points and the timestamp. And this is where I had to come up with my own solution to get single destination trips that are fit towards my testing for the course OD matrix. And this is how I came up the paper split, which came out of nowhere and really we did not plan for this at all. And it's just a sub problem from the main problem. And it was also my preliminary examination. Once I had Transpit ready, I put it back into the main problem. And thankfully, from my preliminary results, I've reduced the error from 56% to 7%. It's still paper in progress. I will talk about, if you want to talk more about how I solved this problem, I can talk about it more in the discussion. For now, I want to leave you with a quote for following your curiosity, because when you solve problems, it's important for me as a researcher to know your solution. Because if someone else gave me Trusted before I had to make it myself, I could have went ahead and finished the course OD Matrix since 2 years ago. Thank you so much.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Areeg, for this presentation. Thank you. And yeah, you're right. That is part of being a researcher. It's like it's a journey, and it's about like discovering and exploration. I love this. Thank you. All right. Now, next presenter, we have Rukhshan, who's going to talk about his work.
So firstly, thank you, Christine and Julia, for having me here today as a panelist. So my name is Rukhshan. I'm a third-year PhD candidate at Tufts University. And my work broadly lies at the intersection of human-computer interaction and accessibility. So by accessibility, I mean making technologies more accessible. I personally, in my work, work with a lot of neurodiverse people, such as autistic people. So the broad research question that I am interested in exploring is, how can large language models support autistic users in interpreting others and expressing themselves in text-based online communication? So autistic people communicate a little differently than neurotypical people. And although there is a lot of diversity within the spectrum as well, there are some common challenges and common traits of autistic communication that we have seen in prior work. So before we start talking about the role of LLMs, it would make sense to talk about some of the challenges that autistic people have been facing in online settings. And by online settings, I specifically mean forums on social media sites or dating applications where they talk to other people, including strangers, over text. So one of the big challenges that many autistic people have faced is that they may find it difficult to detect and interpret nuances like sarcasm, figurative language, and emojis, right? So just imagine, you're talking to somebody, a stranger, on a dating application, and they use a lot of sexual innuendos, right? And you are not able to kind of, detect and interpret it correctly. So in previous studies, a lot of autistic people have expressed that, at times they did not understand when others were having a joke with them. And similarly, one of them stated that I misunderstand other people's meaning quite frequently. So there's, this bunch of problems related to interpreting others over text. And these problems may be there for non-autistic people as well, but these are more pronounced for autistic people because of the specific communication traits that they have. Similarly, there is another problem which is related to their high likelihood of being perceived as rude. So many autistic people prefer a very straightforward or direct way of communication, which means that they may be brutally honest with people, and non-autistic people who may not have knowledge about this find them rude or blunt, right? So many autistic people have expressed that many times when they were just when they were simply expressing a factual and informative statement, they were met with an abusive response, even though they did not intend to be rude or direct with the other person. And the other problem with these social media platforms is that they may be called out publicly, right? Which makes it very hard for autistic people to honestly express their opinions on these sites. So in order to make sure that their messages come across as they intend them to be, a lot of autistic people mask their communication style. So by masking, I mean that they rewrite their message or post to make sure that it comes across as they want it to be, right? And many autistic people have said that this is a very exhausting process because they have had to go through this, multiple times. They write a message, they read it again, they then change it. And even some autistic users also expressed that, they send their message to their friends first, right? They get some feedback from their friends, and once they verified from their friends that the message is okay, then they send it to a potential date on a dating application, right? So masking is like very labor intensive, and this takes a mental toll on them. So as we saw that there are a set of problems related to interpreting others, but then there's a set of problems related to self-expression as well. So these are like some of the problems that we focus on, that we will be focusing on, and we will try to use large language models to help autistic users tackle these problems. So I won't go into the details of what large language models are, but large language model is an advanced AI model which can accept prompts or input in natural language. So just like I'm speaking to you, you can convert this speech to text. You can feed this into a large language model, and the LLM will respond to you in natural language as well, right? And these models are capable of generating human-like text. So if you have used ChatGPT, that's one of the most common examples of a large language model. So to tackle some of these problems in instant messaging, we developed a new texting application which we call TWIPS. So the layout of TWIPS is pretty similar to any standard texting application, but it has three distinct features, and we call them interpret, preview, and suggest. So all of these three features are powered by an LLM, and these three features are gonna intervene in real time. So what this basically means is that when the user is gonna write a message, they might get some feedback, or when the user, gets a message from, their friend, they might, receive some feedback in real time. And now, we're gonna see how these three features work through a demo. So the first feature is the interpret feature. And the function of the interpret feature is to describe the overall emotional tone and meaning of the message. The interpret feature can also identify and explain individual ambiguities within a message, right? So the interpret feature is basically there to help autistic people interpret other people's messages and posts. So now we'll see how the interpret feature works through an example. So here is a message that the autistic user received from their friend, right? And over here, they are discussing about a plan to go to Gloucester. And if you look closely at this text bubble, you will see a gray circular symbol on the upper left corner of the text bubble, right? So, usually you don't, see something like this in your standard texting application. So this, circular symbol indicates to the autistic user that, hey, something might be confusing about this message, and, this message might need closer attention. So after getting this signal, the autistic user, can hover their cursor over the text bubble, and this underlines the individual ambiguous element within the message. So we can assume that this autistic user had configured quips to identify and explain figurative phrases, right? So because of this, the figurative phrase in the message has been underlined. And as soon as the user clicks on the underlined portion, an explanation for it appears, right? So in this way, the interpret feature can first identify and then explain individual ambiguities within a message. And this can be extended to other types of ambiguities as well, such as sarcasm, jokes, or sexual innuendos. The interpret feature can also describe the overall tone and meaning of the message, right? So over here, if the user clicks anywhere else in the text bubble, the overall tone and meaning of the message appears. So that was, the interpret feature. The second feature is the preview feature. And the main function of the preview feature is to describe the recipient's likely reaction to a message, right? So remember, like, a lot of autistic people said that one of the big problems is that, they're just being straightforward, and unintentionally, their message comes across as blunt to the recipient, right? Or rude to the recipient. So this, function really helps them get a preview of how the other person would, read their message, right, emotionally. And, this is supposed to work before the message is sent so that they can kind of verify that their intent comes across as expected. And the preview feature activates automatically, or it can be toggled manually. So the users can click on the button to get the preview, but it's also possible that the user, forgets to do that, right? Or the users don't want to do that for every message, right? So the preview feature proactively flags messages which it thinks may come off as negatively, and indicates the user about it. We will see how preview works together with the third feature, which is the suggest feature. So the suggest feature is supposed to provide an alternate message that the user can send. And this works together with preview. So if preview flags a message as potentially blunt or rude, the suggest feature can generate a new message, which will be the same in meaning as the original message, but it will be softer in tone so that it doesn't come across as blunt or rude. And now we will see an example of how these two features work together. So over here, we can see that an autistic user has written a message. So the message reads as follows: we can do canoeing and scuba diving, but it is a little expensive. You think you can afford it? So at this point, we can assume that the autistic user clicked on the preview button. And upon clicking the preview button, the preview appears in the white box below the message. So the preview goes like, the other user might feel slightly uncomfortable due to the directness regarding affordability. So over here, it explains that the message is like really direct, and it's asking about affordability, which can be like a sensitive topic for many people. So that is why the recipient might feel uncomfortable. And then after the preview, the suggest feature generates a new message, which goes like, we could arrange for canoeing and scuba diving, though it's a bit on the pricey side. Do you think it would work for your budget? So this new message, still asks the other user about affordability, but it does so in, a softer way, right? So the tone is different. So in this way, the preview and suggest features can work together and, alleviate some of the mental toll that is associated with masking, because now it's not the user who's, kind of doing all of the heavy lifting. It's like the AI model that's there for the user doing that. So in the interest of time, I won't, go into the evaluation and the experimental study that we had for TWIPS, but I just want to say that a big part of HCI research is, designing these experimental user studies and then, interacting with users as well. And for me personally, developing the system, has and developing the system, that does have like a direct impact on the end user, but actually getting to interact with so many different users and getting to listen to their different opinions is something that I really enjoy as well. And I feel like, that's one aspect that has helped me grow as an individual, as a researcher, and, also makes me feel that, I'm, becoming like a more empathetic person. And that's also, a part of, like, that's also like a part of social good for me personally.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rukhshan, for this presentation. Your work is like really, it's very fascinating, and it's really like a nice, very, I mean, there's a lot of great ways to use LLM, and this is a great example of it, like how to use it for social good. Love this. Thank you. Now we will to Sumin. We'll be talking about her current work at Wellesley College.
Yeah, so my name is Sumin, and as I was introduced, I'm an undergraduate student at Wellesley College. I'm a senior, so I'm actually wrapping up my last semester at Wellesley. For the past couple of years, I was involved in the Human-Computer Interaction Lab at Wellesley, and I was a part of different research projects, but for this panel, I wanted to share a project that I did for my capstone class, where I looked at the gender presentation in AI voice user interfaces and its influence on participant performance in mock job interviews. So the reason why I chose this project is I thought it was the most relevant to the topic of social good, looking at gender biases in job interviews that may occur from AI interviewer interactions, but also I actually was able to submit this project to a conference to CHI 2025, which got accepted. And this is my first conference that I'll be presenting in person, hopefully in Japan. So this was really exciting for me, where I kind of like started to realize like the impact or kind of the more academic side of how research can lead me. So I also wanted to kind of share that insight as well. But going back to the research, the main goal and motivation for this was of how we see more and more AI technology being integrated into the job interview process. A statistic from the Harvard Business Review showing that now 86% of employers use job interviews mediated by technology, and a lot of them being these automated voice interfaces. And through literature review and analysis, we knew that there were gendered interactions that occur from traditional job interviews and human-to-human interactions. And the motivation for this research was that we found it was particularly important to see how this translates in a digital AI space. So the main goal in our study was to investigate how different gender presentations, such as like feminine or masculine AI voices, influence participants' performance during mock job interviews. And the main research questions that we wanted to look at was how this would impact formal language, sentence structure, and vocabulary that the interviewee would use, how it would impact the willingness to share personal information, the perception of AI's authority and competence, and the self-reported confidence levels before and after the job interview. So I'm going to go quickly through the protocol that we did, but this was the main study. So we did a pre-study survey, we did the interview, which lasted about 20 minutes, and we also did the post-study survey. The AI interviewer, the interface was created using OpenAI's API, and we had 14 participants, and 7 for the feminine condition. They interacted with a feminine voice presenting AI interviewer, and the other 7 interacted with a masculine voice AI interviewer. So this was basically kind of the interface. I'm not really going to play the video, but essentially, as you can see, it was kind of when you press this microphone, you would like be able to kind of input your like responses, and then the text-to-speech of the OpenAI interface would basically respond to you back. So this would simulate kind of like a mock job interview setting. But this was essentially to simulate more of a behavioral interview. So it wasn't asking about any specific industry questions. It was mostly about, so what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How do you deal with conflict? The typical questions that you might get asked in a real interview setting. So we asked the participants to give us like the 3-word descriptions to kind of to assess what their interview experiences were like. And we found that like through sentiment analysis, that participants who interacted with the feminine AI interviewer use more positive descriptions to describe their experience compared to their male counterparts. We also found that a lot of participants felt that the feminine voice seemed more realistic compared to the masculine voice, which they described to say that it sounds like ChatGPT or more automated. I'm gonna go quickly over the results for each research question that I said, but through statistical analysis, we were able to see that participants who interacted with the female AI interviewer had more lexical diversity in their responses compared to those of the male AI interviewer. Unfortunately, there wasn't really a significance for how much personal information they shared. And based on how they ranked or they basically how they rated the AI's interviewer's competence on these 8 scales, we found that participants who interacted with the female AI interviewer deemed them to be more modest compared to the male AI interviewer. And lastly, we found that there were different elements of how they kind of describe their confidence levels, and these were different from like the male AI interviewer and the female AI interviewer. So when it came to emphasizing their most valuable work experiences, the male AI interviewer had a decrease in confidence after the interview, whereas the female AI interviewer participants had an increase in confidence. Whereas maintaining a calm approach, participants felt that there was an increase in confidence when they interacted with a masculine voice compared to when they interacted with a feminine voice, which was interesting. But kind of tying back what this research means to the contribution and the social good, we were able to find that a lot of traditional gender norms are still being perpetuated in AI chatbot interactions, such as how a lot of participants said that the feminine voice was more modest compared to the masculine voice. And hopefully this research provides insights into how gendered voice effects can guide the development of more inclusive, bias-free interview tools, making it a more equitable platform for all job seekers. So we didn't really examine this in our research, but we hopefully want to kind of incorporate more of like an androgynous voice and how that impacts participant behavior, and to see if this approach of using gender-neutral AI voices minimizes potential gender biases. And we found that this was more like in terms of the social good part, we thought this was quite relevant, as I said in the beginning, of how a lot of like initial screening job interviews are being more and more replaced with AI or automated systems. So this was kind of like a quick overview of the research that I did for the past semester, but I'm really excited because it was kind of my first gateway into like attending a conference and really submitting a paper for like a big, I guess, conference situation. As an undergraduate, I think this really kind of inspired me to think more beyond just kind of schoolwork and coursework and thinking about what independent research I can carry out, and I guess about the social good, how like societal impact I can make. And yeah, so I would love to kind of answer more questions about like my journey and more about my research as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sumin. This was really exciting, and I love the work that you've been doing. And yes, it's super exciting, especially at an undergrad level. It's awesome. And having a poster at Kai, that's going to be fun. You're going to love Kai. All right. So now we move on to the discussion portion of this workshop, where really we will open the floor for everyone. Just really like if you have questions, we can have questions for the panelists, questions for all of them. They can ask about the research, ask about the journey, ask general questions about research. So please feel free to type in your questions. We'll give you a few minutes. We know that it takes time to type. So please feel free to ask your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. We will be monitoring both. Also, feel free to talk if you want to. You can unmute yourself and just ask the question. You don't have to type it. Like now we're at decision. You can just ask the question if you want. China?
Hello, hi. My name is China and I'm a second year student. I'm just kind of getting started in research, and I enjoyed listening to you guys' presentations. I thought they were really fascinating. I just wanted to know like what are some of the major breakthroughs or discoveries that you found in your area of research, and what like moving forward, like what do you see your research in the future, or what impact do you see it making globally? And just like what is the main goal of your research? Like what do you want to what do you see it doing or creating in the future?
All right, that is such a nice question. Thank you, China. I don't know who wants to go first, panelists. Feel free to
I can
go
go.
ahead, Areeg.
I can go first. Yeah. So, personally for me, I see like Mapedia is such a huge project because I don't know if you looked into OpenStreetMap. It did revolutionize a lot of the mapping services worldwide. For it even has an impact on. They have this called HOT organization, humanitarian mapping. They even did it even in crisis areas or natural disaster areas. They've been mapping hardly to get the aid in for a lot of the areas. But the OpenStreetMap is limited to the topology. So when our project hopefully gets out soon with metadata worldwide, we can have the routing much faster and like things much more efficient, especially in humanitarian needed areas, but also for developing countries, it would be much, much easier for them, similar to how it is in like the United States or in Europe. So yeah, this is for the Mapedia project.
No. Rukhshan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I think the most relevant breakthroughs are in AI and in generative AI. But one of the problems is that even like the ChatGPT model costs like $20 a month, right? And this is like super expensive for many people in the US as well as like especially outside of the US in developing countries, right? So like the accessibility of generative AI in general is something that we are working on. And even though like my current project is more like about the one that I shared is more about developing a prototype and like doing some in-lab testing, but we have like been working on some projects that have more real-world impact as well. So for example, we developed this chat bot over WhatsApp, and we released it in 3 developing countries, and we have like over 100 users who've been using it for over 6 months, right? And the main key or the key goal over here is to provide cheap um, but reasonable in quality Gen AI services in these regions, right? So one of the features that we have in that chatbot is that we first use a cheap or like a small model to generate an answer, and that's what we use for most of the queries, right? But if the user feels that the answer is not sufficiently good, they can click on the button and choose to use a better model to get a response. So it turned out that a good number of the queries or questions could be answered by the small model, right? And there were only like, a small number, a small percentage of queries that actually needed the large model, right? So that was, like something that saved us a lot of cost, but it also enabled us to provide these, state-of-the-art Gen AI services to a lot of people in developing countries.
Awesome. It's awesome. Sumin?
Yeah, I think for me, how I approached my research wasn't necessarily I'm going to solve this really big like breakthrough. I'm going to make this breakthrough or solve this really big problem. I think I kind of wanted to just talk about more on like the flip side of how like research can start from like for me it was like as a senior like doing like job interviews, I was basically just like talking with like automated systems for a lot of my initial first interviews. And I was thinking about, okay, so how does this impact if like let's say like OpenAI is like more of the generative AI is being implemented into these systems, how is it going to impact my performance and the judgment or like how is my performance going to be evaluated? And I think from that kind of individual curiosity, I started doing more research and as I did more research, I was able to kind of find more literature about how, like, traditionally there has been a lot of gender interactions that unfortunately negatively impact the evaluations of like female like job applicants when they interact with male interviewers. And there's like gender interactions that happen there that kind of limit them from getting opportunities, which I found that, okay, this is like a really relevant topic that I can hopefully address through my research. And I think that kind of evolved into like looking at more like about gender biases and human AI interactions and kind of looking at biases in AI systems as well. So I think, yeah, I just wanted to kind of talk about how like research like I didn't really set a big goal of like solving a bigger problem, and it kind of like naturally evolved where I was thinking about myself, but then it kind of I started to address more bigger problems as I continue my research.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you, Balance. I love this. Like, yes, the answer is really, you'll see that it's a range. Like when it talking about social good, it can go from their existing tools that help society, but they have, missing information, or they have their own, cons, like you want to fix it and you want to do something better. It could be that there's this idea that, it hasn't been thought of before, and you're like, or it has been, like people have attempted to solve a bigger problem, but they just, now there are new tools that allow us to solve the problem, that actually allow us to solve the problem because no one has been able to. Going and then ranging even to that it could be a personal passion, a personal thing that a person has went through and is like, hey, what if I can study this and investigate this and build something that will not just help myself as a person, but then of course help others who might be going through the same, inquiries or investigations. And I like this. Yes. So like social good is a huge range. It's almost all, I mean, in my opinion, tech always has that social good in it. It's just that it's important to highlight it. All right, so I don't know if there are other questions right away. We have a question in the chat. If someone wants to ask, go ahead, Julie.
Before we go to the chat, I see that there are two questions in the Q&A function.
I see, yes, I see one. Oh, there's two in the Q&A?
Yes.
Oh, yes, okay, so let me see, which one should we, okay, let's address the question in the chat real quick, if that's okay, and then we'll go to the questions in the Q&A. All right. So there's the question title that says, you guys have all such cool projects. And then there's a question for Rukhshan. I don't know, actually, this is for, how do you measure success? How do you evaluate success? And I would like to actually ask that question to everyone as well. When it's in your work, when you are trying to evaluate the success of your approach, how do you measure it? Especially when you're saying that there's social good in this. Like, what is your metric? Is there a metric? How do you do it? So Rukhshan, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So in accessibility research, it's very important that we get the voices of the population that we are working for, right? So this means that if I'm working for autistic people, then I must have autistic people come in and evaluate it. In fact, as you might have realized, that the design of TWIPS, the application we built, it was completely informed by autistic experiences, right? So even before we started developing the project, the application, we conducted a lot an in-depth literature review, and sometimes we have to conduct formative work from scratch if sufficient work has already not been done, right? So there is that. But from being more specific, what I do in my research is I employ a lot of qualitative research methods. So this means designing a user study, having autistic people come in and use it, and then providing us with feedback, right? But ideally, what we would want to do is what we would want to do is we would want to deploy this application in the wild and have autistic people use it with their friends for some time, and then kind of evaluate or see if they were able to have better interactions with other people. So yeah, so I think the gold standard would be that, but for us, this is not always feasible to do, and for that reason, we resort to in lab studies. But with the WhatsApp project, it's deployed in the wild, and people are sending messages every day, and we kind of analyze those logs and see what kind of messages they are sending, what kind of questions they're asking, and how useful they are kind of finding our applications. So if they're if they keep using our application for a long period of time, this means that that there is something useful that they're finding in it. So yeah, it depends on project to project, but those are kind of the major approaches that I use.
Okay, thank you. Sumin, do you want to talk a little bit about real quick, but how would you evaluate? I know you already mentioned a little bit about evaluation when you were presenting your work. In general, is that typically the approach you use when you're evaluating your work?
I think in general, when we think about when I kind of first approached research and I thought about success, it was like, okay, am I going to get a p-value lower than 0.5? And is that going to be significant enough to actually be meaningful? And I think just to echo what Rukhshan said, I think it's way beyond that. And I think it's definitely a lot of insights you can get from qualitative interviews with participants and really getting like the voices of the people who use these systems, I think is the most important. And I think that's kind of how you really feel, oh, am I like actively doing social good with my research? But I think in a larger scale, for me, like this is like a really like a small project and it was kind of developed in like over the course of a semester. But I think the goal for me, I think, to really do social good is that to be like a basis for future research. So I think for me, it was really important that, okay, we highlighted that this is an issue that's happening, and we conducted studies that kind of show that there's like these impacts, like gendered impacts of AI systems, and hopefully, like through other researchers can kind of build off of this and this kind of having this more collaborative, like communication of, okay, like maybe we can address this through other research, and maybe my research can be a foundation or like a motivation or a jumping board for future research that can address this is also, I think, a metric of social good. Yeah.
Like this. Thank you, Areeg. What about you? I mean, I feel like in your field, I have a question for you that when you're not interacting directly with users, for you, what is your measure of success?
So we may not interact with users, but we interact with researchers who work in these areas. So for example, we work with people who volunteer for OpenStreetMap. You can find them in many conferences. You can get to when you talk with people who work with routing and would work in so many areas, especially in research, we don't really have access to data, right? So when you make the data that people need for the research available, where they don't need to collaborate with the industry or the government to be able to do their research, is and how excited they are for your work to come out and be successful is a huge metric for us. So, for example, when we first talked about this project as a vision, uh, a lot of people started speaking to us after the presentation, but how they really want to participate with their own data sets or how they really need such stuff for their work. And when you have so many researchers excited for something like this to come out, to start building their own things on top, just is like a huge honor, and you would know that they would come up with amazing things like for different types of social good.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Like it again, social good comes in different forms. Yes, there's always a benefit. It's just all about the community of people that are benefiting from it. That's perfect. Thank you. All right, so now we have two questions, and when I say there are two, it's because there are two for the grad students and one and like another one for upper student. So I'm gonna first start the question with about grad school. So there's a question about from Sarah about really enjoyed learning about your research. I'm curious, at what point did you decide to pursue a PhD, and was there something that influenced that decision? And then also Sumin, like prep for another question that you got, which is about how do you create time to do research as an undergrad? But we'll first start with the PhD, if you guys don't mind. So Areeg, do you want to start us off with like doing your PhD? What influenced that decision? Was there something that influenced that decision?
Yeah, my hate for the industry was my first push for it. I just don't like the interview process, and I also don't like how constrictive it is. Like, if I want to work in a certain problem, if it does not fit the company that I'm working on, most probably I have to just discard it and continue working on the things that the company would give me as tasks. Even as a researcher in a company, you're still limited, but that's personally for me. But like I've asked when I was preparing for the presentation, actually asked the lab like, what made you do a PhD? Because like, and one interesting one that also kind of resonated with me because I always thought I really want to go back home and continue on project and developing projects there as a professor. So it kind of mix of both worlds. But my friend was like, in my lab, she said a lot of the jobs that she wanted in environmental research and in so many nonprofit organizations, if she wanted to take it as a non-PhD, usually it's without a salary, and also as someone who's not holding a PhD in a meeting full of people who are researchers, her words will not be that of an impact. But as a PhD holder, especially as a woman, a PhD holder in a setting, in a meeting like that, it would be much more meaningful and would also give her the salary she would need to sustain her life while doing something that she really, really likes. So that was one really amazing answer that I got as a motivation.
Thank you. Rukhshan, what about you?
Yeah, so it's like similar to what Areeg described. But like personally, if I try to recall how I was feeling like 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was mainly that with the PhD, you can really choose what you want to work on, right? Um, um, and I feel like you don't always get this opportunity within a PhD program, right? Sometimes the, the funding is limited, or there's like a very specific grant that your advisor wants you to work on. But for me personally, so my advisor has been great in terms of giving me the flexibility of what I want to do, and I think that's what I enjoy the most, right? And it's not just the flexibility of what I want to work on, but it's also more about independently leading something on my own. And I feel like being in academia kind of lets you do that, right? And I feel like, so even though I don't have like a lot of industry experience, but that's what my perception is, that in the industry you don't get to, you don't get that sort of independence. So that was kind of my reason.
That makes sense then. Thank you. And now Sumin, how do you create time to do research as an undergrad?
I think for me, I try to like actively seek out for um like opportunities in class where they let you do research. Like the project I showed was actually just a semester project for a class, which was actually coursework, but then I had to do like additional work for like for 3 weeks after classes ended to kind of make a paper and make it presentable to like apply for conferences and all. But I think it's really hard when you kind of separate like, okay, this is like coursework and this is research. I think a lot of it kind of happens in the middle or even sometimes like in the classroom itself. And I think even when I was like a first year or a second year and when I wasn't really like where I wasn't really able to take classes that granted me a lot of independence. I think a lot of the just like the research and the coursework that I did, like I'm a sociology major, so I did a lot of research on like gender biases and like taking courses and like looking at like discrimination and like a lot of those like sociology courses and like kind of gave me the frameworks to really like build off of when I got this like opportunity to do an independent project. So I think kind of like I think for if I were to like give advice to underclassmen in college, I think it's just like, oh, really kind of figure out what you're interested in. And I think like when the opportunity comes, it just like naturally just like evolves into like the research that you want to do. So I think that was kind of my way of approaching research and kind of balancing it with like the classes that I took in undergrad.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much, Sumin, for this because it kind of interestingly connects it on the next question we have, which is how do you connect topics learned in class with the topics needed for research projects? And I'll open this question for everyone. Like in the classes you've taken, how were you able, like how do you connect them? Like is it a clear thing when a professor asks you, okay, there's going to be a project, or have you experienced before like the idea that you get ideas from a course and you try and link them to your research or apply them into your research? And like anyone can go ahead if you want to.
Yeah,
Very good.
for me, I guess because when I went into PhD, the professor right away gave me a problem to work on. So while I was working on my courses, I've been trying to see what can I use to solve the problem that I have. Because I work with very large data, like the data sets that are available for us is huge, because it's spatial data, a lot of GPS points, and it just does not fit into memory. Every time I try, my laptop crashed a lot. I stopped working on my laptop. I started working on servers. Even the servers, if I use one, it does not work, so I have to use multiple. So this is how I got into parallel computing course and got into how I can divide the data, there's so many tools that I can use and just ask the professor outright, like what are the tools that are possible, what is not possible for such a problem that I have. I also went into spatial data science class. That was my first thing I went to because when I got into my PhD, interestingly, I didn't even know what is spatial data. I just know it's regarding maps, but I was not really into it as an undergrad because it's not really one of the things that you would learn um, in my home country at least. So when I came into my PhD, I took the spatial data science. I started learning about all types of spatial data, the indexing, and all of this just helped me start working on my problem and how to solve it, but not really like have an idea of a project because I already had the idea. I was just trying to figure out from the courses that I'm taking, whether it's algorithms, like the open data and so many other courses and how to solve the problem I have while just getting into my coursework as well. It's been very, very helpful to me actually.
It's great. Thank you, Areeg. Rukhshan?
Yeah, so I just want to say that the courses I took in undergrad, they might not have directly helped me, but um, they had prepared me enough to be able to learn new things that I needed for my PhD research. So when I came into the program, I did not know like what field within CS I wanted to pursue. So I like knew nothing about accessibility. I knew nothing about autism. And actually, for like the first semester I was here at Tufts, I was actually exploring networking research because that's what my background was in, right? But then, I took this course in HCI and accessibility, and that was actually like my first HCI course. And, I got so interested in it, and it was more like, a research course. So I got to like read a lot of papers. And from then on, I started taking some courses in, different departments that provided me with some domain knowledge about autism. Um, but yeah, so it was like a journey. And yeah.
I love that. Thank you, Rukhshan. And then Sumin, I know you kind of referred to that in your courses, kind of being a direct result, like kind of beginning to getting into the research, and great. So I don't know if you want to add to it or I think we lost Rukhshan.
Um, I can quickly add to my response. I think for me, like what really drew me to like doing HCI in the first place was I came from more of like a humanities background. Like in high school, before college, I would never think of myself as a STEM person or doing anything related to computer science. And I think my first kind of moment came from when I took kind of the introductory like UI UX course that was basically a foundation for HCI, and they talked about kind of the ethical considerations, and they kind of drew in a lot of the humanities aspect of it. And I think that was when I really clicked with the course material, and I was like, okay, I want to learn more about this. I want to do my own research in this, and I want to kind of explore like deeper beyond course material. So I think um like opportunities really come like when you don't really expect them to be. And I think just being like really attentive and alert to like what you're learning in your courses and really kind of gauging what interests you and what you're attracted to um can be a really good foundation to start your own research.
I love this. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I really want to thank again all of our panelists. I mean, I can't believe it's already 2. We're already out of time. But really, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who attended and for your questions. Please stay for I just want to say thank you. I mean, and let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Just tell them, thank you. Love this. If you have any more questions, if you want to stay for just a minute or two to ask more questions to our panelists, please feel free to do so. But we're gonna kind of officially end the recording. Expect survey emails and other emails to follow up after you're done with the Zoom. No, like you're gonna get the survey right after.
Yes, as soon as
Yes,
you
the
close
survey
out
right
the
after.
Zoom, the survey should pop up in browser. Please, please, please take the survey. We can only learn from what you tell us, so we'd love to use your feedback to help make these sessions as productive and as positive for you as possible. We hope to see you at the next spring workshop, which we'll be announcing soon. So please stay in touch. Please continue to get involved. Thank you again to our panel. We'll be asking our panel if they're willing to share their emails and contact information with folks afterwards. But we appreciate your involvement throughout today's session.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia, and thank you, everyone. Thank you.